Hello everyone, meet Steve, a successful CSX dispatcher. He's a happy person at home and a productive guy at work. He takes care of himself, which helps him take care of others. But to be honest, things weren't always so rosy. Just a year ago, Steve had difficulty focusing on any task and was easily irritated. His quality of life was suffering, as were the people who had to put up with him, and it was all due to a simple lack of sleep. You see, Steve used to think he could manage his busy schedule on only 4 hours of sleep. But by cutting his sleep cycle short of 8 hours, he was robbing himself of rest needed to complete his responsibilities with efficiency and ease. Let's see where he went wrong. In this first stage of sleep, Steve spends about 5 to 10 minutes drifting off. In the second stage, his breathing and heart rate slow, and his body temperature drops. Then, Steve moves into the third stage, where his body begins physical repairs. Tissue growth and healing occur as his body releases hormones and increases blood supply to his muscles. This is the deepest and most restorative stage, which is why the first 4 hours of sleep are mostly spent in this third stage. Consequently, during those same first 4 hours, very little time is spent in REM sleep, where dreaming and cognitive repair occur. In fact, it's not until sleep hours 6 through 8 that the body switches primary focus from physical to mental healing, making these final hours crucial for overall well-being, especially for a knowledge-based worker like Steve. So, when his alarm used to go off after 4 hours, Steve would awaken physically okay, but mentally impaired, still ill-prepared to handle whatever life might throw at him that day. We could think of it like a cell phone battery. Charging your phone for a short amount of time will give it just enough juice to keep the power on, but it's going to run out quickly and won't function at its optimal level. Now, if you're like Steve, you might think, is losing an hour or two of sleep really a big deal? Yes, it actually is. For every 2 hours Steve is awake, he needs 1 hour of sleep to balance out what we call his sleep bank. But for every hour he cuts his sleep cycle short, Steve's accumulating debt that can only be repaid with more sleep. Until he finds time to catch up, Steve continuously robs himself of the next day's potential value. For every night he didn't get 8 hours, Steve decreased his reaction time and increased his chances of making mistakes. His mental grogginess made even the simplest tasks seem challenging. This often resulted in silly, embarrassing slip-ups at home, especially during his morning routine. But as a dispatcher, such a mistake could cause serious harm to someone he works with, so Steve would fight his fatigue with caffeine. Caffeine can be a useful aid when you need a pick-me-up to stay alert, as long as it's used smartly and sparingly. Steve's sleep debt, however, made him overconsume and crave it, and he wasn't aware that it was doing more harm than good. His caffeine abuse led to headaches, a disgruntled attitude, and disrupted his sleep patterns. The stimulant caused him to stay up later, wake more often, and consequently began to cut into his restorative sleep, all of which made it difficult to complete his day without added stress. As a result, it didn't take long for Steve to exhaust himself in mind and body. He was continuously making poor choices because he couldn't think clearly. His irritability began to bother him more than it bothered others. Steve was tired of being tired. Instead of wallowing in his weariness, Steve decided to make sleep a priority. He started listening to his body, and by making a few simple changes to his regular routine, now enjoys more energy, less anxiety, and improved memory. All it took was for Steve to pay closer attention to his internal clock, also known as his circadian rhythm. It runs 24 hours a day and marks time by light cues, telling your body when to stay alert versus when to fall asleep. This new awareness led Steve to make conscious choices about planning his day. He starts his day with a better breakfast, exercises often, and opts for an earlier bedtime instead of late-night TV and cheese puffs. And he always aims for 8 hours to balance out his sleep bank. He's safer, more alert, and more productive. And all it took was adding a few hours of sleep back into his regular routine. Way to go, Steve!